Hello lovelies, today we're going to be taking a look at Ripcrypt, which isn't out yet. This is a preview version of the game that was sent to me. It's a forthcoming sort of dungeon raiding quick form RPG by Keenan Antos, or Kainan Antos, or I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm doing it wrong, almost for definite. Anyway, I was asked to look at this, obviously, to kind of promote it ahead of time for when they're going to be crowdfunding and trying to raise awareness of it. So I'm going to be nice. I might give it some scores as it stands, but obviously this is not the final production version. However, it is a nice little hardback book, about 150 pages. It came with a few cards and things in plastic sleeves, which I imagine will be different in the final version. I would imagine maybe sort of harder plastic, dry erase sorts of things, perhaps. It also came with a nice thank you note, which is always appreciated. Thank you so much for everything that you do for this amazing community. I don't know whether that's boilerplate or personalized, but I appreciate it. So yeah, these are sort of little character record things, and we also got a couple of stickers for promo. So that was nice. I imagine you'll get the cards and the book, obviously. As to other material, I don't know. It also came with a nice little velvety dice bag and some 8-sided dice. The game primarily uses 8-sided dice. So we have 3 conventional D8s with different coloured digits on them, and another dice for direction, north, south, east, west, and all the in-between points, which did actually strike me as slightly odd when I got into the game, but be that as it may. So yeah, this is a pre-release version, hardback, ribbon, 150 pages, few cards in plastic sleeves. As I said, presumably the final version for those will be dry erase or something. Also came with the pouch and a few D6s. In terms of presentation, a lot of design cues presentation-wise seem to come from Shadow Dark, and a lot from that whole sort of side of modern game design. Yeah, to an extent, to a point. Things like Morkborg, Shadow Dark, Index Card RPG, and so on. You can play this solo, which I did to try and get a handle on it, but it's optimized for 2 to 8 players, one of whom is the Games Master. Uses those 8-sided dice, which is an interesting choice. And when you roll to do things, you'll roll with a fairly small dice pool against a variable target number. Rolls of 8 are counted as a success and are re-rolled again, granting potentially more successes for more 8s. And that is called ripping. Rolls of 1 are counted as failures and re-rolled. Getting another 1 causes your roll to be a crypt, which is a botch, unless you got an 8 on one of your other dice. You can also use 2 dice together to create a D88, the same way you roll a D66 or a D100. It is meant to be played on a battle map. You can play without one, should you so wish, but it uses a compressed grid scale of 10 feet to a square instead of the standard 5 feet to a square. Not a big deal if you want to convert it back and forth in whatever way you might want to do. Characters have 4 main stats: Grit, Gait, Grip, and Glim. All G words. Grit is your strength, your endurance, your close combat ability. Gait is your speed, agility. It's what you use for ranged attacks. Grip is your leadership, influence, charisma, and morale. Glim is your reason, intuition, and Glimcraft, which is a form of magic. These typically run 1 to 4, statistics-wise. Guts is your health, which is determined by adding all of your stats together. So typically starts at 5. So presumably it means different things for different stats, but health is an overall measure of like will, physical endurance, all of those things put together. You further customize your character with fate, which is determined by one of the directions, and that plinks up one of your stats, and that's based on north, south, east, west, which also comes in other parts of the game, but which makes that D8 with the northeasts and southwests as well a weird choice, because if you're going north, south, east, west, you should have a dice that just does north, south, east, west. So that it seems odd to have the dice with the in-betweens, unless you want to use that for generating dungeons and determining where passages and things are, that sort of thing. But with regard to the game mechanics, it's a little odd. If you want to cast magic proper, you need to have, I think it's a Western Fate, but that has other impacts. Your direction does. It might determine your initiative order in a particular combat, things like that. Everyone can do little bits of magic called Thin Glim, which is kind of like Witcher signs, really. You know, little small effects like repairing gear and weapons or creating a small gust of wind. You know, things like that. Weapons. So you have damage that you do for each success. So that typically, again, ranges from 1 on up. So a lot of weapons do 2 damage per success. So if you roll a success, you do 2 damage to the enemy. And armor moves down how much damage you take. It takes away, it doesn't make you harder to hit, which I always like and appreciate. It's quite formalized in its turns. So each turn you set out 3d8 from your little bag of doom. 1 to mark the current turn, 1 for fate, which ties into your fate to determine the order you go in and who has edge that time, which is in accordance with fate. Edge and drag basically makes things slightly easier or slightly more difficult for you. So as the winds of fate change, you might get a little bonus. So you might want to wait things out until you have the advantage, and then you can go. When you try to do something, you roll your d8s. So as we saw, starting characters generally only have 1 or 2 in stats. And difficulty is not necessarily a direct comparison, but if you're trying to hit something that has a better ability than you in that thing, then it's more difficult. If you're better than them, it's easier, and that goes up to 2 steps in each way. So it's less about the raw stats necessarily, and more about how those stats compare to each other. So a high stat compounds itself because you'll be rolling more dice and against an easier difficulty. But the exploding 8s make, long shots at least possible. Incautious actions and taking too long during your sort of exploration phases accumulates event dice, which are rolled and which in turn lead to little sort of mini twists and encounters, like the threat level going up, hostile wandering monsters finding you, or you finding treasure or objects, things like that. The world setting, it's a world in which almost everyone lives underground after the surface has been ruined by a magical calamity, but the setting isn't oppressive. It's not that detailed and gone into. It's kind of just enough. So you could port this to just about any other setting if you wanted. The setting does have black powder weapons, So, you could simulate Darkest Dungeon and things like that with it. It has some fairly good random generators, but they are possibly too random for dungeons to necessarily make sense. There are some things that aren't defined, so like there's a thing called an exploration kit, but that doesn't exist in the equipment section. You have delve kit, ration kit, cook kit, med kit, tool kit, arbiter kit, craft kit, and wild kit, but no exploration kit. I'm assuming an exploration kit can be either a delve or a wild kit, but that's not set out. That's just my assumption. And this is a pre-release early copy, so there are a few spelling errors and so on I saw, and on a lot of the random tables, even though it's like a D88 or a 2D8 or a 3D8 roll, the dice column still just says 1D8. Yeah, that's a minor thing, but these little things need correction. One of my favourite typos I found in the book was it referred to black power weapons. Right on, brothers. So, yeah, I think it needs a couple more editing passes before they completely finalise the document for Showtime. It desperately needs a proper index and also a proper glossary of terms, so you can figure out what edge and drag mean, but it's hard to find the specific section where it first lays out those topics. You kind of realise looking at the tables what it is, but it would be useful to have all of these terms and everything laid out and a decent index so you can find the references to these things immediately when you need to. So when I did my sort of little single player run through, it's a new game, so you have to reference the book a lot, but it was rendered quite difficult. Also, it's cute calling all the statistics by variations on the G word on G words and with 4 letters. It's cute and it's funny, but it does make referencing a little more difficult. As does changing a lot of commonly used terms. So like rip for crit, and crypt for botch. It's like how everyone seems to want to change the term Games Master. I'm not sure whether the juice is worth the squeeze on these sorts of things. So yeah, if I was to have any recommendations, it would be a couple more editing passes, an index, a glossary, possibly even a slightly expanded contents as well. Anything to make referencing the book a lot easier. The artwork is nice. It's a bit of a mix, but it's all presented in a somewhat more unified way, which is nice. And you do have reference tables for all the rules, pretty much. But again, referencing is a bit difficult even with those, and for equipment and so on. So it just needs a little bit more massaging into shape, I think. I'm not going to give it scores because this is not reflective of the final product, but from what you can see here, obviously it's pretty good quality. This is a game I think you will be looking to play as a filler, as a kind of stand-in. You all meet up and then someone gets called away because of a family emergency, or just because they're an asshole who doesn't tell you when they can't make it to a game, and then you want something to play, and you could play Ripcrypt and fill out a session slot easy enough, or at conventions and so on. I also think with the emphasis on the grid and so on, though it's not necessary, this could be a good bridging product to proper role-playing games. So if you know someone who likes, say, Descent, or Talisman, or any of those, or Hero Quest, any of those sort of quasi role-playing board games, then this would be a good bridge to a more genuine and full-on proper RPG. Now, I did run a little one-player session for myself. So I created a character who was a black powder user with a rifle and a pistol and a short sword. Starting character, basic armor, delving by himself. The adventure I generated was to penetrate an old mine building and find a cursing hex that was somewhere in there that was causing problems from the area around it. It took me some time to break through a few rooms because the hazards that I rolled was basically jammed doors. Eventually found a room full of webs, and following that, a corridor in which a giant spider called a cryptid was. This thing vastly overmatched a single character. I fired, missed, made a hurried reload while retreating away from the thing, took another shot, winged its leg for 1 point of damage out of 12 health, keeping in mind I only had 5 health. Then scored a rather brilliant success with my short sword, which did 6 damage, minus its armor, and then I was bitten in the head and instantly killed. So, it is a fairly straightforward, fairly deadly looking game. I believe it is being crowdfunded in March for the final version. Hopefully they'll make some revisions and things to it for then. But I think it's there, apart from a decent index, a glossary of terms, and maybe a slightly better contents page. He says, looking for the contents page. There we go. I mean, it's already fairly good, but I think it needs to be broken down a little bit more. And you've got some real estate there that you could expand into to an extent, just to make sure that all the important terms are easily referenced. But there you go. Well, I already have a copy, so I might not back it. We'll see what the changes are like. But I think it will be worth a look when it comes up to crowdfund. And my advice is mostly organizational and editing. Sang. Sup, bitches? I'm reliably informed that I'm terrible at pimping my stuff. So here I am, pimping my stuff in what's hopefully an amusing way. If you want to interact with me and follow me, you can find me on Twitter @Grinosaur and @Mort_post for official announcements.
The gallows is cold and the gibbet is lonely. We'll make things hard for you here. The gallows is cold and the gibbet is lonely. We'll make things hard for you, Joni, my dear.
And this is not a time to be dismayed. This is punk rock time. This is what Joe Strummer trained you for. It is now time to go. You're a good person. That means more now than ever.